The New York City gridiron is an incredibly efficient and user-friendly arrangement of city streets. Everything is going east-west or north-south.
One of the things that makes a community very walkable is that it's also very sittable and it's easy to relax in. And it's great to have some passive space for people to sit down and relax and enjoy themselves. You encourage people to stay outside, to walk more, to be active in their community when they are able to use more open space. One of the great things about walking is that you get to experience the built environment. You can appreciate the boulevards and the streetscape and the trees and the plantings and the architecture and the history. One of the key things to making a walkable community is that you want to feel safe. So when you have nice wide sidewalks, there's commerce taking place, crosswalks at work, seating areas, it really encourages people to be out, to enjoy their time, to use it well, and to walk more. Harlem is a really walkable community. It's a type of place where it's much more efficient and fun to get around by foot. This is an example of a mid-block crossing right here on 125th Street. This is a pretty long street, and actually setting up a crosswalk where people have been naturally crossing slows down traffic, it helps people feel more safe to be out in the street, and it encourages walking.
Crowded streets are interesting. They're ultimately safer.
People go to New York City and at first they think, oh, well, New York City must be a horrible place to walk because of all the traffic and everything. But actually, they come home and they say, I've never walked so much in my life. It was so much fun. I didn't realize that I was walking so far.
The quality of life in a city is not just how fast you can get down a highway and how great the subways run, but it's also how well you can walk and relate to people and connect with people.
Parks are an important part of improving the quality of life in any community, be that a small pocket park or something as large as Central Park in New York City.
Central Park is over 100 years old. It's a huge part of the fabric of New York City and takes up probably some of the most expensive real estate in the world, and it's all made to be publicly accessible open space. That says a lot about how open space matters and how parks matter and how having places to walk and to relax really matter to cities.
If you go to Central Park today, you'll see that it brings together people from all walks of life. It's active and it's important for all of New Yorkers. I mean, I can't imagine New York City functioning as it does without that big green space.
There's points where you can walk around where you're the only person and you never feel that way in New York City. And there's sometimes you don't even feel like you're in a city, you're in a woods or something. It's beautiful. It's such a great retreat for New Yorkers.
It gives you a moment of peace that you don't find in the city.
The HighLine is New York's newest and most unusual public park. You walk from one point to another, and the views and the kinds of experiences that have been designed into the park are quite unique. It is on the west side of Manhattan, 30 feet up in the air on an old freight railway that it hadn't been used for about 3 decades.
Some people recognized that it was a really cool space and it was open and near the water, and plants started to grow on it. People had gardens in it.
From what I understand, there's a couple of neighbors that were really emphatic about the idea of maybe doing an adaptive reuse for creative open space.
5 or 10 years ago, the city decided to make it into a walking park where you can see thousands of people walk each day.
It's just really a great example of reimagining space, rethinking about where we walk and how we create open space. It's obviously beautiful and picturesque.
It's beautiful, it's in a great location. It's really innovative as far as using something that might have been a very expensive demolition project is now probably one of New York's greatest new tourist attractions.
It's a great place. We read about it and wanted to come and have a look at it.
I think it's a fantastic use of the space in the city and a great opportunity to explore the city in a bit of a different way.
This particular space is incredible because of its location, where you can see the water and there aren't a lot of tall buildings around it, so the sun is coming down. But also, like, the structure it's historic. It has architectural details that you just don't see in structures anymore. It gives people a chance to experience not only nature, but to kind of see a part of the past and the history of this area. I think that reuse is really important because they did just torn this down and thrown the metal in a dump, but they didn't. And so, now we can walk on it and breathe fresh air, and it's awesome.
It is a destination. Walking Fifth Avenue is a destination, but now it's the HighLine. It's something special. And that's what we're seeing now is these kinds of projects are creating kind of a local tourism. And that's huge.
It really encourages you to walk in a place where you probably wouldn't have walked before. The avenue that it goes along is not the most inviting. And by being elevated, being in this big, beautiful park above ground, you're encouraged to take a walk in a part of the city that you may not have walked down. And the best way to enjoy it is to walk it.
A lot of solutions in New York these days are pedestrian driven. I don't think anyone could have imagined taking a old freight railway and turning it into a linear park 25 years ago. I think parks were viewed as being Central Park, Prospect Park. They were viewed as artificial versions of nature. The HighLine is basically an elevated street. So in some ways it could only be inspired by a major city where people are used to walking.
When you're in the streets of New York City, you've got cars coming by you, trains, and up here you can hear it, but you're not a part of it. And you can kind of observe it, but you're not in the thick of it.
Perfectly safe. You're not going to get hit by a car accidentally or something else crossing the street. There's so many families and peoples of all ages that are here today, and it's obviously loved by just the entire cross-section of the population.
It's such an inviting place to come here and walk around, and all of a sudden you're in a good mood when you're here.
I think it really brings people together just in terms of everyone's out here walking, sitting. You kind of communicate with one another in a really different way than if you're walking down the street kind of hurrying.
I'm sure you could probably tie it into even tourism dollars that's happening for New York, so it's good for the city in that way as well to have created something like this.
It's a good place to walk, and that's why I'm here. For somebody like myself who's new to the city and you kind of want to see everything you could see, I mean, this is gorgeous.
After I go for a walk, I go back home and I'm happy. No matter what you went through, you're just happy afterwards.
I just feel great being up here. We're just hitting up on sunset, and it's a beautiful time of day. And it's very inspiring. So it's good for the spirit and the soul.
It has spurred new retail, a huge amount of new residential development has gone up around that park. And as a result of that, other cities are looking at that kind of model. And so you have plans in Philadelphia and in Chicago and a number of other places where citizens are trying to do the same thing.
I'm a licensed clinical social worker, founder of Walk and Talk Therapy, and this is my office, Central Park. I walk with my therapy clients instead of meeting in an office in a traditional couch therapist setting. Somebody asked, what about confidentiality? You're outside, what if somebody hears? This is New York, nobody's paying attention. The whole concept started about 5 years ago when I had a client who's a Wall Street guy and had very difficult time getting off of work, traveling up to my office, having a session, traveling back. It was just way too much time. My wife said, why don't you go to him and have the session outside, just walking around his office. And my first response was, we just don't do that. That's not a possibility. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like, okay, this could work. There's really no reason why I couldn't. So I offered it to him. He had been in treatment with me for a good 6 months. And for the first time, he started feeling better. He started talking about things that we had never addressed before. There was a sense of energy about him. I began offering it to other clients, and then it kind of blossomed from there. It's much more dynamic than being inside. It does take a certain type of person that will embrace something different, like being outside for their counseling session. But once they've tried it, they're very reluctant to go back into the office for a session. Like a rainy day or a snowy day, they're the ones that are pushing, no, let's just put on a heavy coat, keep walking, it won't be that bad, because they feel the benefit of being outside. I do it because it's effective. I see people getting better, feeling better much more quickly than in an office setting. It's particularly good for men. And my theory is that men have a very difficult time making eye contact and talking about very difficult things. But to walk side by side with someone, in general, you're looking ahead and you're outdoors, you're standing up, you're breathing fresh air. I also think it's a metaphor for moving forward. In an office, you're actually sitting in your issues. Here, you're moving forward in your body, and you're beginning to kind of move forward with your life too. You feel like you're doing something, not just sitting and talking about doing something. When you're up and moving, that's when the subconscious can bring up some ideas that perhaps were there, but you weren't open to them. Depression is alleviated a great deal with physical activity. Being physically active will release a lot of that tension of anxiety. Being outdoors and among other people helps one to see the world as a bigger place. It's not just about you, and that I'm not alone in the world. I will say to a patient who is suffering from severe symptoms of anxiety or depression and fear, if you're going to get better, you're going to have to move your body 3 or 4 times a week. Use the stairs instead of the elevator. Get outside and walk a little bit. Don't take the car when you could walk. Little things like that, you're going to start to feel better, and you're going to start to see some progress from our work together.
The MAS tour programs are pretty impressive. They're the type of tour that appeals to a visitor but also appeals to a New Yorker. And the reason why is because you can live in a city your entire life and always discover something new.
Being on foot is the best way to look at the city's architecture. A walk allows you to stop, turn your head, look up, look down, and it's also easier to reverse and take a second look at something from a different perspective. Today's walk is going to focus on the skyscraper between 1890 and 1930. That's the old Tiffany Stores building. Each floor is decorated in a different way. The arches that you see are actually the cast iron arches that were part of that building that was built in the 1870s or 80s.
Thinking about the history of a community and walking by a building and really understanding the story that happened there and the people who live there and the architecture is something that really helps enhance your experience of being a New Yorker.
This is the Con Edison building. The Manhattan Gas Light Company was in this location in the 1880s. When you go up 10 floors, there are those rosettes that are in the recesses. Those originally all had lights in them. Part of its character of the building has always been illumination.
New York is the kind of city where there are a lot of big landmarks. I mean, there's so many famous and fantastic places to bring people to. So when you discover new places and lesser known jewels, you really do get a different appreciation for your city.
Come on, let's walk.